How stupid do filmmakers think the viewing public is? Am I crazy, or is Flow an unbelievably long and boring slog? I genuinely don't understand the hype that is built up around this movie. I don't understand how it got an Oscar nomination, and I believe that it's probably going to win the Oscar, but I'll talk about that more in a little bit. Flow feels like a movie that a couple of college kids came up with while getting stoned in their dorm playing Stray. All of a sudden, one of them looked up and said, "Dude, what if we made this into a movie?" And they just went with that. And it was just as boring as you would think a video game about cats would be if you turned it into a movie. So let's take apart Flow and talk about why I don't think that Flow deserves the Oscar it almost inevitably is going to win. The first problem I have with this movie is its complete and total failure to make me care about anything that has happened with the characters. The first scene introduces us to this cat who's being chased by dogs and looking at its reflection occasionally. The cat does nothing special. It doesn't have any friends, it doesn't make any connections, and it doesn't suffer from any tragedy. It is just a cat, and the movie acts like they expect that to be enough. It doesn't set up any compelling qualities for the cat because it's a cute little kitty, and the movie thinks that's all it needs to be. People will connect to this character just because it's a cat. I'm here to tell you that being a cat does not make a compelling character. Movie characters are likable because they have compelling traits and they fulfill archetypes. The cat does none of these things. It simply looks at his reflection, gets into danger, and then escapes danger. And the worst part is, it would have been relatively easy to give this movie higher stakes. They could have simply added an implied loss for the cat. If it had a partner that had been lost in a tragedy, or if it had been betrayed by its original pack, the cat's standoffish behavior later in the film would be more understandable. But none of that is there, so it just is less impactful. The movie has given us no reason to be attached to the main character. This is a big part of the reason I feel like this movie is designed like a video game. Not only is it animated like a video game, but the plot is structured as though the cat is completing levels. The cat encounters danger, and then the danger is resolved, sometimes through the actions of the cat, and sometimes through the actions of an external force having absolutely nothing to do with the cat. The cat ends up not even feeling like an agent in its own movie. It is frequently saved by dumb luck or the heroic actions of other characters. I know that this is a story about the cat learning to trust, but I have to reiterate that I don't understand why it matters that the cat doesn't trust in the first place. There's no compelling reason given for the cat's lack of trust, so the movie doesn't give any danger in the idea of trusting people. If trusting the other characters in the film was a risk for the cat, if we implicitly understood that due to the events prior to that in the film, then we could better understand the cat's plight, and it would feel more like it had a character arc. Instead, it feels like the film is just saying that you should trust others, and giving no real drawbacks to that, and completely ignoring the very real danger that implicit trust prevents. There are predators, and a distrustful nature can make you less vulnerable to the very real predators who prey on the overly trustful and naive. Flow is littered with symbols that make for a more interesting background, but ultimately struggle to support the overall message. The film takes place in a post-apocalyptic world from which humans are completely absent, but you can still see the remnants of a past human society. The objects created by humans that are left in the film are used a lot for the symbolism in the film. Early in the film, we see a tremendous amount of cat statues left over, perhaps alluding to the cat's isolated nature and its high standing among the once dominant humans. It also plays into some of the self-reflection and self-awareness themes that we see play out in the film. The lemur collects shiny symbols and refuses to let them go. This materialistic trait seems to be characteristic of lemurs more generally in the movie, as later on we see a pack of lemurs decked out in jewelry. I honestly have no idea what the point of this is. I think it's some kind of confused tie between materialism and self-awareness. It represents a lesson learned by the main lemur, but honestly, like with a lot of the symbols, things are left so vague by the plot that I really have no idea how to tie it to the overall story message. This is the problem with most of the symbolism. It feels like it was needed to make the visuals more interesting, adding some depth to a film that desperately needed it, but all of these symbols kind of end up confusing the narrative because they add thematic elements that are going in far too many directions for the audience to keep up with, leading to the overarching theme becoming more vague and confused than it already was. Speaking of vague and confused, we have this strange representation of the death of the bird, or at least I think that's what this is. The bird floats off into a white light, never to be seen again. This kind of loss would have been something that could have added to the stakes of the movie if it was placed earlier on in the film. The bird's death could feel like a reason for the cat to be a loner, having been hurt by its friend. This seems to be taking into account some of the drawbacks of trusting people, of letting yourself be vulnerable to people getting hurt, but it fails to have the impact that it should have. The cat doesn't have the emotion that you think it does, and I think this weird kind of vague interpretation of the death leaves it a little too ambiguous to have the emotional impact that it would have otherwise. I expect that a lot of critics will excuse the vagueness of some of these events by saying that it's left open to interpretation. The problem with that is, things can only be left open to interpretation if they're concise enough to leave you a perceptual framework to interpret them through. This film is so open to interpretation that you can't get a grounding in the world to interpret what things might mean. Everything is open to interpretation, therefore nothing is interpretable. Yet another confusing plot point is the whale. The whale acts as almost a god figure. It saves the cat out of nowhere after adding a little bit of terror into the movie early on. Once the flood recedes, the whale is left trapped on land. We have another representation of loss for the cat, and this loss feels real. This is the first loss, and maybe the most impactful plot point of the movie. Not to worry though, there's an after-credits scene, which I missed the first time I watched the movie, that shows the whale living happily after a recurrence of the flood. As if the relative lack of plot wasn't insulting enough, the film decides to make an after-credits scene that retcons the most significant and impactful plot point. The whale is another example of why the cat should trust people and not live in fear, because the whale poses this significant threat early in the film, but then winds up saving the cat. Not only is this message a boring line to use as your central thesis for a film with no dialogue, but it's also a stupid message. The film acts as though there's no danger in trusting things, that there is everything to be gained and nothing to lose. But this just isn't true. The reason cats are standoffish to new things is because new scary things often kill you. And this is a fact that the movie seems to completely ignore. And on that note, I'd like to pause for a moment and give Flo some credit where it's due. The last thing that I want to do is make people feel stupid or less than for enjoying a movie that I don't like. And there are a few things I did like about Flo. And if you enjoyed the movie, let me know why in the comments, because it's okay to enjoy things. Art is a subjective experience, and you're allowed to like what you like, whether I like it or not, even though I'm willing to shout my opinion loudly into a microphone. The cinematography in Flow is fantastic, and is definitely the thing that I like most about the movie. The animation style is interesting, the use of bright, vibrant colors is a great choice, the world is very pretty, and the positioning and movement of the camera is very creative. Personally, I don't think CGI animation will ever beat out traditional hand-drawn animation, but this movie is a step in the right direction for CGI animation. It's a beautiful movie, and deserves a lot of credit for that. I also just like the world. I like the idea of an animal-dominated planet facing extreme weather and the characters having to survive this. I think that the underlying premise of Flow is very interesting. In this movie, I just think it was poorly executed. I also like the movie No One Will Save You. I think that movie is absolutely brilliant, and you might be asking yourself at this moment, why does that matter in this video about Flow? But I'll tell you why it matters. It matters because I can see the future. I can see the future! And I know there's going to be comments telling me that I just didn't look deeply enough in this movie, and I just didn't like it because there was no dialogue. But guess what? No One Will Save You also had virtually no dialogue. And in this movie, it was basically perfectly executed. My criticism of Flow does not relate to it not having dialogue. My criticism of Flow is that it is a largely pointless movie that disguises itself as something deep, even though it has nothing of particular importance to say. The last thing that really bothers me about this film isn't in the film at all. It's about one of the director's comments to the media after the film was released. He makes the claim that his film transcends culture because it lacks dialogue. This comment on the surface sounds like a really nice sentiment. It sounds like because this film doesn't have any dialogue, anyone who speaks any language can enjoy this film. But do you know what else everyone can understand? Do you know what else transcends culture? Literally every movie ever made. With the advent of AI closed captioning, Every movie can be captioned in any language, so anybody can watch a movie, any movie, with their native language subtitles. And if you think that subtitles degrade the movie watching experience, keep in mind that Parasite was released only in Korean and is widely considered to be one of the best movies ever made. On top of that, the average animated movie is translated into 40 different languages, meaning the vast majority of the world can watch an animated movie in their native tongue and barely even notice that it's been dubbed over. To me, this comment comes across as a pretentious director virtue signaling to people who don't know any better because he doesn't actually have a good enough reason for this plot not to have any dialogue. It serves the plot in basically no way at all. And in filmmaking, I understand that there is a concept of showing instead of telling. You shouldn't use expository dialogue where you don't have to, but flow doesn't really show you enough. Flow doesn't show you any particular reason to connect with the characters, so it would help if it told us some reasons to connect with the characters. But I do think that Flow is going to win an Oscar. Granted, I haven't seen any of the other films nominated for an Oscar, but here's why I think that Flow is going to win. Simply because it's different. It's weird, and oftentimes people conflate weird with good. And at risk of sounding like a hypocrite, I have frequently on this channel wanted filmmakers and film studios to take more risks and to make more weird stuff. I like weird movies. I loved Dinner in America. I even made a video on it. Check it out up here. I think that it's good that people took a risk and it was successful. I think it's good that there is a weird film that's not like anything else that's out there and doing well. And like I said, I don't want to make anyone feel stupid for liking this movie. In fact, I genuinely hope that you did like it. I hope that most people enjoyed their viewing experience more than I did. What's frustrating to me is that when the group of people responsible for giving the most prestigious award in filmmaking look to a film that's weird and different for some of the wrong reasons and call it good in what seems like a pretentious bid to look smarter than everybody else. It's very similar to what they did with The Shape of Water, and maybe I'll do that in a video soon, so get subscribed for that. Anyway, my total score for Flow was a 3 out of 10. I really was not a fan of this movie. I do think that it's a below average movie, and that's all I got. If you liked this video, let me know in the comments. If you liked Flow, let me know in the comments. And like and subscribe. Make sure to check out another one of my videos. I just did one recently on A24's We Live in Time.